caught in a violent storm. A single mom and her daughter stumble across an abandoned mountain cabin. Little did they know, the place they thought would offer safety would soon reveal mysteries that would change their lives forever. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this resonate with you, hit that subscribe button, because the next chapter will leave you speechless. The wind howled through the trees like a wild animal, its strength bending the branches until they creaked in protest. Ava Peterson gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles turning white as she tried to keep the car steady against the ferocious gusts. She glanced at her daughter, Lily, who was staring out the window, her face illuminated by the flickering lights of the dashboard. "Mom, why is it so windy?" Lily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Ava offered a reassuring smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just a storm, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. We'll be home soon." But Ava knew better. The mountain roads were treacherous in this weather, and they weren't even halfway to the small cabin she'd rented for the weekend. They'd been trying to escape the city for months, hoping a few days in the mountains would offer the respite they desperately needed. Instead, they were caught in a storm that had arrived faster than forecasted, and now they were stranded. Ava's breath hitched as the rain began to pour, beating against the windshield in sheets. The visibility dropped to nearly nothing, and she could barely make out the outlines of the trees on either side of the road. Her heart raced, and she swerved slightly as the car hit a patch of slick mud. The tires slid, and she gripped the wheel harder, praying that the old sedan would stay on course. "I can't see the road, Mom," Lily said, her voice trembling. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she tried to navigate through the storm, the faint glow of her headlights illuminating only a few feet ahead. Panic crept in, but she shoved it down. She had to stay calm for Lily. Suddenly, the car lurched to the side, and before Ava could react, the vehicle spun out of control. The tires screeched as the car slid off the road, and in a flash, they were tumbling down an incline. Ava screamed as the world spun around them. Trees flashing past the windows, the car scraping against the earth. Everything went black. When Ava opened her eyes, she was disoriented. She could hear the faint sound of wind and the soft growl of thunder, but the car was eerily still. Her chest tightened as she looked over at Lily, who was clutching the seatbelt, her wide eyes filled with fear. "Mom?" Lily's voice was shaky. "I'm here, sweetie," Ava whispered, her own voice unsteady. She quickly checked herself. No blood, no broken bones, but the car was stuck. They had gone off the road, and there was no telling how far down they had fallen. Outside, the storm was still raging, but there was something else, something she didn't expect. Through the trees, she caught a glimpse of a structure, an old cabin barely visible through the downpour. Hope surged in her chest. "Hold on, Lily. I think I see something," Ava said, her heart pounding. "We're going to make it out of this." She pulled herself together and unbuckled her seatbelt. The rain had slowed slightly, but the air was thick with the storm's aftermath. They needed shelter, and fast. Ava grabbed Lily's hand, opened the door, and they both stepped out into the wet earth, their boots sinking into the mud. Together, they trudged toward the distant cabin, the wind howling around them as the storm showed no signs of letting up. As Ava approached the cabin, her exhaustion was quickly replaced with a strange sense of wonder. It stood there, nestled against the mountain, its stone chimney puffing smoke into the dark sky. The cabin looked old, weathered, and worn, but it had a sturdy, almost inviting feel to it. The windows were dark, but a faint glow from the fire inside flickered in the reflection of the rain. The structure was more than just shelter. It felt like it had witnessed 1,000 storms, perhaps even protected its inhabitants from the worst of them. "Mom, it's like a fairy tale house," Lily said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. Ava smiled at her daughter, the unease that had settled in her chest now replaced with cautious optimism. "Maybe it's just what we need right now." They made their way to the porch, and Ava reached for the door, hesitant. She wasn't sure if it was even locked, but as her hand touched the worn wood, the door creaked open, revealing a dark interior. It smelled of pine and old wood, with a trace of something earthy, like moss or wet leaves. The flickering light of a fire danced on the far wall. "Well, I guess we're not going anywhere for a while," Ava muttered, stepping inside. She looked around the dimly lit cabin, her eyes scanning the walls adorned with shelves, old cooking tools, and a few faded photographs that hung crookedly in the corners. The place had been abandoned for some time, but it was well maintained. Whoever had lived here clearly took pride in their home, even if no one had lived here in a long while. Lily was already investigating the small stone hearth, her small fingers tracing the edges of the chimney. Her curiosity piqued. "Look, Mom, there's a stove in here." Lily's excitement broke through the tension. She ran over to the old wood stove, its cast iron surface dark with age, but the fire inside was warm and welcoming. Ava smiled softly, grateful for Lily's enthusiasm. The storm outside might have been terrifying, but for the first time in hours, they had found peace. The crackling fire, the quiet hum of the wind, and the feeling of solid ground beneath her boots brought a sense of calm that Ava hadn't realized she needed. But as she stood there, the warmth of the cabin making her feel a little more grounded, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a heaviness in the air, a feeling that the cabin, with all its charm, held secrets just beneath the surface. "Let's settle in for the night," Ava said, pushing the uneasy thoughts aside. "We'll figure things out in the morning." As she unpacked their small belongings and made a place by the fire, she glanced at Lily, who was already making herself at home. It would be okay, at least for tonight. The rain continued to drum against the roof, steady and rhythmic, as Ava sat by the fire, her eyes flicking between the dancing flames and the strange, quiet cabin around them. The warmth of the hearth had soothed some of the tension in her shoulders, but a different kind of discomfort lingered in the back of her mind. This cabin, this place felt too perfect, too quiet, as if it had been waiting for them to arrive. Lily was curled up on the old couch near the fire, her eyes heavy with sleep, but Ava couldn't bring herself to rest. Instead, she wandered through the room, drawn to the oddity of the space. The wooden beams in the ceiling, the worn furniture, and the shelves filled with jars, tins, and old cooking tools. It all seemed so deliberate, yet abandoned. Her eyes landed on an old wooden chest near the back wall. The latch was worn, and the wood had darkened with age, but it wasn't locked. Ava's fingers brushed over the rough surface, feeling the weight of the years embedded in its grain. She hesitated for only a moment before lifting the lid. Inside was a collection of old photographs, yellowed, frayed at the edges, and several letters tied together with string. She gently picked up the first photograph, holding it close to the firelight. It was a family portrait, the kind that seemed to belong to another time. A man, his face weathered but kind, stood next to a woman with soft eyes, and a little girl who looked no older than Lily. They were all standing in front of the very cabin Ava had just entered, smiles frozen in time. She stared at the photo, her mind racing. Who were these people? What had happened to them? She shuffled through the rest of the items in the chest. More photographs, handwritten notes, and a journal. The journal was the last item she picked up. Its leather cover cracked and faded. She carefully opened it, flipping through the pages filled with cramped handwriting. As she read, she learned about the family who had lived in the cabin, the mountain man who had built it, and the tragedies that had driven them all to leave. The man's name was Joseph Archer, and the woman in the photograph was his wife, Evelyn. The girl, little Emma, had been their daughter. According to the journal, they had all been happy, living peacefully in the cabin for years, isolated but content. But as the seasons passed, something began to change. Joseph had grown more reclusive, spending long hours in the woods, while Evelyn and Emma stayed inside. The journal's tone shifted as it went on shorter entries, more cryptic. Finally, the last entry read, "I can hear them outside. They're calling my name. I don't know how much longer I can keep them away from Evelyn and Emma. I think the mountain wants us. I think it's time to leave." Ava closed the journal, her heart pounding. What had happened to them? Where had they gone? The fire crackled softly as the storm continued its assault on the mountain, its fury unmatched. Ava sat still in the dim light, the journal resting in her lap. Her mind swirled with the unsettling words she had just read. The story of Joseph, Evelyn, and Emma had left a mark on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that their presence was still lingering in the cabin. She glanced over at Lily, who had fallen asleep on the couch, her small form curled up beneath a blanket. The storm outside seemed to match, the unease growing within Ava. There was something about this place, something that felt wrong. Ava stood, her feet silent on the wooden floor, and walked toward the window. She peered through the rain-streaked glass, the cabin's reflection hazy in the storm's glow. The mountain loomed in the distance, dark and menacing, the trees shifting with the wind. She couldn't help but feel a pull toward it, a sense of being watched, as if the mountain itself was waiting for something. A sudden noise broke her from her thoughts. A creak, soft but distinct, echoed from the far side of the room, the area where the kitchen once stood. Ava froze, her heart racing. At first, she thought it was just the settling of the old cabin, but then she heard it again, a slow, deliberate creak, like the sound of a door opening, followed by the faintest whisper of footsteps. Ava's pulse quickened. She looked over at Lily, still asleep, and then toward the source of the sound. The air in the cabin felt heavier, colder, as if someone was moving through it. She stood motionless for a moment, straining to hear anything further, but the cabin was silent again. She slowly exhaled, trying to steady her nerves. Maybe it was the storm, she thought. Maybe the wind was playing tricks on her mind. But as she turned back to the fire, her eyes caught a shadow flicker across the far wall, just beyond the doorway. Ava blinked, her breath catching in her throat. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for the light switch. The cabin's warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, but the chill she felt in her chest didn't dissipate. There was something, or someone here, watching. Ava's heart hammered in her chest. She needed to find out more. She had to know if the history of the cabin, the stories left behind, were just memories or something far more haunting. As she stepped forward, the floorboards creaked beneath her weight. The shadow disappeared, but the unsettling feeling lingered. The air in the cabin was thick with unease, a heavy presence that seemed to cling to the walls and every worn piece of furniture. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had always been a practical woman, rational, grounded, but there was something about this place that tugged at her, pulling her deeper into a mystery that she didn't quite understand. After the unsettling sound and the strange flicker of shadows in the corner of her eye, Ava decided she needed to find more answers. The journal had left her with more questions than answers, and she knew that if she was going to stay here, she needed to understand what had happened to Joseph, Evelyn, and Emma. She began to search the cabin with renewed purpose, moving from room to room, looking for anything that might offer a clue. The living room was simple, yet charming, with its old stone fireplace and weathered armchairs. There were small trinkets on the shelves, pocket watches, antique mugs, and even a few hand-carved figures, but nothing that gave her more insight into the previous occupants. Next, she moved into the kitchen. The wooden counters were worn but still functional, and old jars of dried herbs lined the shelves above the stove. It was then that her gaze fell on something unexpected. Tucked in the back corner, behind a stack of unused dishes, was a small door, a trapdoor. Ava bent down to examine it. Her curiosity piqued. She ran her fingers over the brass handle, which seemed oddly clean compared to the rest of the room, and pulled it open. Beneath the trapdoor was a narrow, spiraling staircase that led down into darkness. Ava hesitated. Something about it felt like an invitation, and yet, she didn't know if she was ready to uncover what lay below. But she had no choice. She had to know. After grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen counter, Ava took a deep breath and descended the stairs. The air grew cooler as she moved down, and the damp, earthy scent of old stone filled her nostrils. The flashlight beam danced along the walls, revealing shelves stocked with jars of preserves, dried meats, and odd-looking tools. It was a makeshift pantry of sorts, but there was something unusual about the space. Everything was organized meticulously, like it had been prepared for a long stay, yet untouched for years. At the far end of the room, behind a stack of crates, she spotted a chest. She moved toward it, the floor creaking beneath her feet. The chest was heavy, covered in dust and cobwebs, but it wasn't locked. Ava slowly lifted the lid and felt a chill run down her spine as she looked inside. There were more photographs, but these were different. They weren't family pictures. They were of the cabin itself, its exterior and its surroundings, but something was wrong. The sky was darker in these pictures, the air more ominous. In every image, Joseph stood alone, his face tense, his eyes wild. One of the photographs stood out, though. It was a black and white image of Joseph, Evelyn, and Emma standing together outside the cabin. But in the background, there was a figure dark, tall, and barely visible against the trees. It was as if someone or something was watching them. Ava's heart began to race, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. She pulled the photograph closer to her flashlight, but when she looked up again, the figure was gone from the picture. The room felt colder, and the shadows seemed to grow longer. Ava quickly placed the photo back in the chest, her hands trembling. She didn't know what she had uncovered, but she felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The cabin had secrets that hadn't stayed buried for long. The next morning, the storm had passed. The clouds had parted, and the sky was a soft blue, streaked with light. The air was still fresh, though the remnants of rain clung to the trees and grass like a lingering memory. Ava stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the mist rise from the valley below. She couldn't shake the strange feeling that the storm had left more behind than just a clearing sky. Inside, Lily had woken early, excited to explore the cabin's surroundings, now that the weather had calmed. She ran around the small yard with the dog, excited to stretch her legs, while Ava stood by the window, her gaze lost in thought. The journal and the photographs haunted her mind, and the mystery of Joseph and his family tugged at her like a magnetic force. As much as she wanted to ignore it, she knew she couldn't. The more she discovered about the cabin's past, the more it felt like fate had led them here not just to escape the storm, but to uncover something far deeper. Later that afternoon, after Lily had settled in with a book, Ava found herself standing by the trapdoor again. She hadn't planned on going back down into the cellar so soon, but something urged her. She needed to understand what had happened here. Maybe the key to everything lay in the mystery of Joseph's family and their sudden disappearance. This time, she grabbed Lily's jacket and went downstairs alone. As she entered the pantry again, she noticed something different. The chest had been disturbed. The photographs she had placed back inside were now scattered across the floor. She stood frozen for a moment, her breath caught in her throat. Had someone else been here while she was upstairs? Suddenly, a soft sound echoed from the back of the room, a gentle scraping, like the sound of something moving. Ava turned slowly, her heart racing. In the far corner, the figure from the photograph stood, just beyond the shadows. It was no longer just a ghost of the past. It was here, now, in front of her. For a moment, she stood frozen, unable to speak, as the figure inched forward. It wasn't human, it couldn't be. The chill in the room intensified, and Ava felt a presence she couldn't ignore. And then, as quickly as it appeared, the figure was gone, vanishing into the shadows of the cellar, leaving nothing but silence behind. Ava backed out of the cellar, her heart thudding in her chest. She didn't know what she had seen, but one thing was certain: there was something about this place that wouldn't let them leave. Something tied to the mountain and to the people who had once called it home, and it wasn't finished with them yet. Ava sat at the small wooden table in the cabin, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. She hadn't felt this unsettled in a long time, but the discoveries she'd made in the cellar had left her with more questions than answers. The strange figure she'd glimpsed in the cellar still haunted her thoughts. She couldn't ignore the overwhelming sense that something, or someone, was trying to communicate with her. Lily was outside, playing with the dog, her laughter a stark contrast to the tension building in the cabin. Ava glanced at the journal she had discovered, now opened in front of her. The words were cryptic, but they had revealed more than she initially realized. Joseph Archer, the man who had built this cabin, had written his thoughts with an urgency that made Ava's skin crawl. The journal wasn't just a record of daily life, it was a confession, an unraveling of a mind slowly slipping into paranoia. Ava turned the pages, rereading one entry over and over again. "They're here again. I don't know how much longer we can stay hidden. I can hear them whispering outside the door at night, calling my name. The others say I'm hearing things, that I'm imagining shadows in the dark. But I know I'm not. They want something from us. They want us to leave. But I won't. I can't." The further she read, the more Ava understood. Joseph had been desperately trying to keep his family safe. It wasn't just the isolation of the mountains that had driven him to the edge, it was something deeper. Something in the land itself seemed to be alive, something that wanted them gone. The more she uncovered, the more it became clear that Joseph had a connection to the land. He had come to these mountains seeking refuge, but instead, he had encountered something sinister. It was as if the mountain itself was cursed, a force that wouldn't allow those who sought shelter to remain for long. Ava's fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Joseph's final entry was hastily written, the ink smudged as if he had been in a hurry to finish his thoughts. "I don't know how much time I have left," The mountain calls to me now, and I can't fight it anymore. Evelyn and Emma, they're scared. I've heard their cries at night, calling for me. I'll never forgive myself if they come for them too. Ava closed the journal, her heart pounding. She had to understand more. There was something about Joseph's story, something about his desperation that seemed all too familiar. It was as if he had been a mirror to her own fears, her own desire to protect Lily, no matter what. But the truth was clear now. The cabin, this mountain, wasn't just a place of refuge, it was a prison. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, with the storm having completely cleared the skies. But Ava couldn't shake the dark feeling that had settled in her chest. Every time she closed her eyes, the whispers from the night before echoed in her mind. They were faint, like a distant wind tugging at her thoughts. But Ava knew the truth, something was trying to reach her, something tied to the mountain. And no matter how much she wanted to ignore it, the truth was clear. This place was not just a sanctuary. It was a prison, and it was drawing them in. Ava spent the morning walking around the property, trying to clear her mind. She tried to focus on the quiet beauty of the land, the wildflowers swaying in the breeze, the distant peaks rising high into the sky. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the journal, to Joseph's frantic words, and to the strange presence she had felt in the cabin the night before. She walked past the stone chimney, her gaze lingering on the ridge above the cabin, where the dark forest began. The trees whispered in the wind, and for a moment, Ava swore she could hear footsteps, like someone was following her. She stopped and listened, but there was nothing, just the wind. By noon, Lily had grown restless. She was sitting on the porch, throwing a stick for the dog, her face clouded with confusion. Ava knew that Lily could sense the shift in the air, could feel the tension that hung over the cabin like a heavy fog. "Mom, can we go back to the city now?" Lily asked quietly, looking up at her with wide, searching eyes. "I don't like it here anymore." Ava's heart sank at her daughter's words. She didn't like it here either. But they couldn't just leave. Not yet. They needed answers. And the only way to get them was to confront whatever was lurking in the shadows of the cabin. "I know, sweetie," Ava replied softly, kneeling beside her. "But we need to stay a little longer. I'm going to find out what's going on here, and then we'll leave. I promise." But as Ava spoke, a new realization began to settle in. There was a decision to be made, and she knew it wouldn't be easy. The mountain, the cabin, and the land, they had all become a part of her now. Joseph's story wasn't just his own. It was a warning. But there was also something else. A connection, a pull. The longer she stayed, the more Ava felt herself becoming entangled with this place. It was as if the land had claimed her, just like it had claimed Joseph and his family. Ava knew she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The mountain wasn't just drawing them in, it was testing her. And the only question left was whether she would stay and face whatever lay hidden in the shadows, or leave, never to return, and risk losing the very thing she had come here to protect, her daughter. Her heart pounded as she gazed at the distant peaks, her mind wrestling with the choice ahead. Would she face the mountain's secrets, or would she run? She didn't know yet, but she had to decide soon. Because whatever was waiting on the other side of this decision, it would change everything. The days passed, each one blending into the next as Ava became more entrenched in the mystery surrounding the cabin. The whispers she had heard in the night still echoed in her mind, growing louder, more insistent. They were not just figments of her imagination. Something someone was trying to communicate with her, to reveal the truth about the cabin, about the mountain, and about Joseph's family. Despite her best efforts to ignore it, Ava could feel the walls of the cabin closing in on her. She had tried to shake off the sense of dread that permeated every corner of the house, but it clung to her like a heavy fog. The more she discovered about Joseph, Archer's life, and the family who had once lived there, the more she realized the gravity of the situation. They hadn't left voluntarily. They hadn't been driven away by circumstances or fate. The mountain itself had claimed them. One evening, as the sun began to set and the shadows in the cabin stretched long, Ava found herself standing in front of the trapdoor once more. The cellar. It had been calling to her since the moment she had first discovered it, and now, she couldn't deny it any longer. Something deep inside urged her to descend again. She had to face whatever lay hidden beneath the floorboards. This time, she wasn't going down alone. She glanced at Lily, who had been quieter than usual. Her daughter, though still young, had picked up on the tension in the air. Ava could see the questions in her eyes, the uncertainty, the fear. Lily was scared, but Ava wasn't sure if she could protect her from whatever waited in the shadows. "We're going to be okay," Ava said, trying to reassure Lily, though the words tasted hollow in her mouth. She had no idea if they would be okay. Together, they descended into the cold, dimly lit cellar. The air was thick, with the musty smell of earth and decay. The flashlight beam bounced off the stone walls as they stepped forward. This time, Ava was determined to find the source of the feeling that had haunted her since they arrived. She had to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing something she couldn't understand. At the far end of the room, Ava noticed something she hadn't seen before. A doorway, partially concealed by a stack of crates. Her heart pounded as she approached it, the feeling of being watched intensifying. She reached for the doorknob, her hand shaking slightly. With a deep breath, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. Behind it, there was a small, hidden room, its walls lined with shelves. But what caught Ava's eye immediately was the large, weathered trunk sitting in the center of the room. It was old, covered in dust and cobwebs, but the moment Ava laid eyes on it, she knew it held the answers she had been searching for. She approached the trunk cautiously, her fingers trembling as she lifted the heavy lid. Inside, she found more photographs, some familiar, others new. There were images of Joseph and his family, but there were also images of something far darker. Shadows in the background, strange figures lurking just beyond the frame. And in one photograph, the shadow of a tall, unnerving figure that appeared to be watching them. The room grew colder as Ava looked closer at the images. She realized that the figure wasn't just a shadow, it was real. It was the same figure she had seen in the corner of the cabin. The figure that had haunted Joseph and his family. It wasn't human, and it hadn't left. Ava's breath caught in her throat as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The mountain, the cabin, the mysterious figure it was, all connected. And it wasn't just Joseph's family who had been trapped here. It was them now. The mountain was alive, and it wasn't going to let them go. Ava sat in the dim glow of the fire that crackled in the hearth, the weight of the truth settling heavy on her chest. She had uncovered the cabin's darkest secrets, the chilling truth of Joseph Archer's family, and the strange force that had haunted them. It wasn't just a place of refuge, it was a prison. The mountain had claimed its inhabitants, and now, it seemed, it wanted to claim them as well. But as the fire danced, Ava realized something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. The mountain might have taken Joseph's family, but it had not taken theirs. The storm had passed, the whispers had faded. The figure in the shadows no longer haunted her thoughts. Ava had faced the darkness, and she had not been consumed by it. Lily sat beside her, the warmth of the fire casting a soft glow on her face. She was still, afraid, but there was a quiet strength in her now, something Ava hadn't noticed before. They had survived. They had made it through the storm, and the mountain, no matter how much it tried to hold them captive, could not break their bond. "We're going to be okay," Ava whispered to herself, the words this time feeling more real than ever. "We'll make this our home." Ava stood and walked to the door, looking out at the land that stretched before her. The forest was silent now, the mountain towering in the distance, but the tension had lifted. It wasn't gone entirely, but Ava felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt before. She had broken the cycle. She had confronted the past, and now, she could finally look toward the future. This place, once a prison, would now become their sanctuary. Together, Ava and Lily would rebuild their lives, not just in the shadow of the mountain, but with a new understanding of the strength they carried inside. They had faced the Senjin, darkness together, and now they would build something new, something lasting on the foundation of everything they had survived. As Ava turned back into the cabin, she knew that their journey was far from over, but it was their journey now. And no storm, no shadow, no mountain could take that from them. They were free. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sort of tension. The storm had long passed, but the silence in the cabin seemed to stretch in ways Ava wasn't used to. The world outside was still, the trees heavy with the weight of the past few days' rainfall, and the mountain stood like a silent sentinel, watching over them. Ava had hoped that the darkness would lift, that the mystery would dissolve, but the more time she spent here, the more the land seemed to hold her in its grip. Ava found herself standing at the cabin's edge late one afternoon, staring out at the dense woods that surrounded them. The sun was low, casting an eerie golden glow over everything, and she could hear the distant call of birds, the rustling of leaves. It was beautiful, serene, even, but it felt suffocating. The mountain wasn't done with them. The echoes of the past were still reverberating through the trees. Lily had started to explore the area more, her curiosity finally breaking through the lingering fear. She ran around the yard, her laughter filling the space, but even Lily couldn't ignore the change in the air. Ava noticed how her daughter kept glancing at the trees, how she would occasionally stop, staring into the distance, as if waiting for something. Ava couldn't explain it, but she knew Lily wasn't imagining things. The mountain had a presence, one that didn't seem to go away. That evening, as the wind picked up, a sudden thought struck Ava. She couldn't simply ignore the force that had followed them here. The mountain had claimed Joseph Archer and his family, but it had also let them survive. It was time to face it, to make peace with it. Ava had spent so long running from her past, avoiding her fears, that she had forgotten one important truth. She couldn't outrun what had shaped her, just as she couldn't outrun the land that had shaped this cabin. There was a deep pull inside her, urging her to walk into the woods, to confront the place that had haunted Joseph, Evelyn, and Emma. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. Ava's fingers tightened around the worn journal she'd kept by the fire. Joseph's words had been the key to everything, but now it was time to unlock the rest of the story. As she walked into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around her. The air grew heavier, colder, the wind whispering through the branches as if calling her name. Ava couldn't help but feel the weight of those whispers, the ancient voices of the mountain pressing in on her. She didn't know what she was looking for, perhaps nothing more than understanding, or maybe something to break the hold the mountain had over her. The trees parted, revealing a small clearing. In the center stood a stone circle, weathered and worn, hidden in the heart of the forest. It wasn't natural. It was ancient, something deliberately placed, like a ritual site. The realization hit her like a wave. The land wasn't just haunted, it was sacred, bound to something far older than Joseph and his family. Ava stepped forward, the air thick with energy. She had come to confront the past, to break free. But in that moment, she realized something else. The land had been waiting for her to understand, to listen. Ava stood in the center of the stone circle, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her. The air felt charged, like electricity was running through her veins. The mountain, the cabin, and the land, they had all been watching her, waiting for her to take this step. She could feel it now, a presence that was both ancient and unyielding, pushing against her from all sides. It was as if the entire forest held its breath, waiting for her to make a choice. Ava glanced back toward the cabin, a small silhouette against the towering trees. Lily was inside, safe for now. But Ava knew the time had come to make a decision. The mountain had claimed Joseph and his family, and it had tried to claim her too. The whispers had been clear. It wanted something from her, from them both. She stood still in the clearing, her heart pounding. In that moment, she realized that Joseph had been right. The mountain wasn't just a place. It was a force, something that needed to be acknowledged, respected, and understood. It wasn't a curse. It was a part of the land, of nature itself. And as much as Ava had tried to fight it, to run from it, she understood now that she couldn't escape it. The only way to move forward was to confront it. With a deep breath, Ava knelt beside the stones, her fingers brushing the cool surface. The mountain had been testing her, just as it had tested Joseph. But now, she felt something shift within her. The fear, the doubt, and the sense of being hunted all faded into something else. A connection. The land wasn't just a place of darkness. It was a part of her, as much a part of her as the cabin had become. It was time to stop running. Ava stood, her body trembling as she faced the towering trees once more. She had come to the clearing, searching for something to break the cycle, to end the fear. But instead, she had found the strength to break free on her own. She wasn't here to fight the mountain anymore. She wasn't here to be a victim. She was here to live, to rebuild, to make a home for Lily, in the very place where others had once been lost. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest. Ava turned and walked back toward the cabin, her steps purposeful, her heart steady. She had made her choice. She wasn't leaving. This place, this mountain would no longer hold power over her. It would be their sanctuary, their home, and nothing would take that from them. As she reached the cabin, she could see Lily standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with curiosity. Ava smiled softly. The weight of her decision still heavy but no longer a burden. The future was unknown, but for the first time since they had arrived, Ava felt at peace. They had faced the past, and now, they could finally move forward. "We're going to be okay," Ava whispered, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. The storm had passed, and for the first time in a long time, they were free. The days following Ava's decision felt different, lighter, as though the weight of the mountain had finally lifted, or at least eased. The air in the cabin no longer felt thick with tension. Instead, it felt welcoming, open, almost warm. For the first time since they had arrived, Ava could breathe deeply, without the constant gnawing feeling of something watching them. It was as if the land had finally accepted them, allowing them to make their peace with it. Lily seemed to notice the change as well. She was outside more, playing with the dog, running freely across the small yard. There was a sparkle in her eyes that hadn't been there before, an innocence that had been clouded by fear was now shining through. She was no longer glancing over her shoulder at the trees, no longer looking for something that wasn't there. The dark presence that had once filled the space between them was gone. Ava stood at the window, watching her daughter with a soft smile. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for Lily's resilience. For so long, Ava had been focused on protecting her from the world outside, from the storms that raged in their lives. But now, it seemed, the greatest storm they had faced had passed. It hadn't just been the physical storm outside. It had been the emotional one, the fear, the uncertainty, and the mystery that had been tethered to the land. The cabin, once a place of refuge from the outside world, had become their home. Ava's gaze shifted to the corner of the room, where the journal lay open on the table. She had read it countless times, each time discovering something new. But now, the words didn't feel as heavy as they once had. Joseph's story had been a warning, yes, but it had also been a guide. He had faced the mountain's pull, and had fought to protect his family, just as Ava had. In the end, it wasn't the mountain that defeated them, it was the isolation, the fear, the inability to understand what they were up against. Ava had learned that to survive in this place, she needed to embrace it not as a victim, but as part of something bigger. She wasn't just living on this land. She was a part of it now. She had faced its ghosts, its secrets, and had emerged stronger for it. But despite the peace that now settled around her, Ava knew this was just the beginning. The mountain, the land, the stories of Joseph's family, they would always be a part of their lives, whether they wanted it to be or not. The key was understanding that the past was never truly gone. It lingered, waiting to be remembered. Ava took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs. She had faced the unknown and had found her strength. She had made her peace with the land, and now, she was ready to build her future. "Mom, come play with me." Lily's voice cut through her thoughts, a call to action Ava had been waiting for. She turned away from the window and walked outside to join her daughter. For the first time in months, she was ready to be fully present in her life. It had been a few weeks since the day Ava had made the choice to stay, and each passing day only confirmed that they had made the right decision. The mountain had ceased its whispers, the cabin no longer held its ghostly presence, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh pine and earth. Ava had stopped looking over her shoulder, stopped second-guessing every creak and groan of the cabin. She had chosen to make it her sanctuary, and it was beginning to feel like one. But it wasn't just the land that had changed, it was Ava, too. She had found a new rhythm in her life, a kind of peace she hadn't known she could possess. There were no more frantic pacing, no more sleepless nights filled with doubts and what-ifs. She had learned to live with the past, to make it a part of their story, rather than something that haunted them. One morning, Ava woke before sunrise, the first light of day barely peeking over the horizon. She stood by the window, gazing out at the sweeping valley below. The world was still, wrapped in the quiet of early morning. The storm had long passed, both the physical and emotional ones. It was a new day, a new chapter. She felt a sense of contentment she hadn't realized she'd been searching for. The cabin was small, the land vast, but in that moment, it felt like everything they needed was Plex's life, right in front of them. They were finally home. Ava wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. The mountain might always be there, standing tall in the distance, but it no longer held the same power over her. She had claimed this land for herself, for Lily, and no shadow would take that away. Lily's laughter echoed from outside, cutting through Ava's thoughts. The sound of her daughter playing, her joy echoing across the yard, was a reminder of everything Ava had fought for. She was building something here, not just a home, but a life, a legacy. She was giving Lily a future that was untainted by the past, a future where fear no longer had a hold over them. Ava joined Lily outside, her heart light. They spent the day together, working in the garden, gathering firewood, and enjoying the simple pleasures that had once felt so out of reach. Each task, no matter how small, felt like a victory. They were creating their own roots, here, firmly planted in the land that had once seemed so foreign to them. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ava stood beside Lily and looked out over the valley. The mountain loomed in the distance, but this time, it felt different. It was no longer an obstacle, no longer a threat. It was just a part of the landscape, part of the world they now called home. Ava took a deep breath, savoring the moment, the peace that had settled around them. She knew the journey ahead would not always be easy, but it would be theirs to make. Together, they would face whatever came next with courage, with hope, and with the knowledge that they were home. The past had shaped them, but the future was theirs to build. And with Lily by her side, Ava was ready for whatever came their way. The mornings were quiet now. Ava had adjusted to the rhythm of the land, waking before the sun to gather her thoughts and prepare for the day. The cabin, once a place of dread, had become a sanctuary, in every sense of the word. She had found peace in its walls, comfort in the work she did, and strength in the memories she had created with Lily. It was their home, and it was everything Ava had fought for. One morning, as she and Lily worked together in the garden, Ava found herself reflecting on how far they had come. Just a few months ago, she had felt lost, unsure of where her life was headed. The city had worn her down, the weight of her past too heavy to carry. But here, in this cabin, she had found a new sense of purpose. "Mom, look, the flowers are starting to bloom." Lily's voice pulled her from her thoughts, and Ava smiled at the sight of her daughter kneeling in the dirt, her hands stained with soil as she carefully tended to the budding flowers. Lily's laughter filled the air as she showed Ava the flowers she had planted herself, a sense of pride in her young eyes. The transformation was incredible. Lily, once scared and uncertain, had blossomed into a confident, happy child, her spirit no longer dampened by the weight of their past struggles. Ava knelt beside her, wiping her hands on her jeans. "You've done a wonderful job, sweetheart," she said, her voice full of pride. She had given Lily a new life here, a life where fear no longer held them captive, and for that, she was grateful. The mountains, which had once seemed so imposing, now felt like distant guardians, watching over them with a quiet, steadfast presence. Ava no longer feared them. The storms had passed, both the literal and metaphorical ones. It was clear now that the challenges they had faced were not meant to break them. They had been tests of resilience, of strength, and they had passed. Ava stood, brushing the dirt from her knees, and looked around at the land they were building together. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living fully, embracing the future with open arms. "Let's go inside and make some lunch," Ava said, smiling at Lily. The joy that now filled her heart was more than just relief. It was hope. They had a future here. Together, they had found a way to thrive. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Ava continued to settle into life at the cabin. There were moments of hard work and moments of quiet peace, but through it all, she had learned to embrace the rhythm of this new life. The past still lingered in the corners of her mind, shadows of the fears they had faced, the weight of the mountain, but it no longer controlled her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Ava sat on the porch with Lily, both of them watching the colors of the sky shift from golden to deep purple. The cabin had become a symbol of their strength, their resilience. It had once been a place of fear, but now it stood as a testament to what they had overcome. Ava looked at Lily, her heart swelling with pride. Her daughter was growing, changing, and flourishing in ways she hadn't imagined. The girl who had been afraid of the dark, of the mountain, was now a young girl full of curiosity, joy, and hope. As they sat together, Ava thought about the legacy she wanted to leave behind. She had come to the cabin searching for answers, trying to outrun her past. But what she had found here was more than just a refuge, it was a place of transformation. She wasn't just building a home, she was building a future. And that future wasn't just hers, it was Lily's. The legacy she was leaving was not just about surviving, but about thriving, about teaching her daughter that no matter how dark the storm, there was always a way to rebuild, to find peace again. They had found their sanctuary here, and in doing so, they had restored something far more important, their hope. Ava smiled as Lily leaned against her, the two of them watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Their journey had been long, but it had led them here, to this place of peace, of promise, and of a new beginning. "This is our home, Mom," Lily said softly, her voice filled with contentment. "Yes, it is," Ava replied, her heart full. "It always has been."